In the last video, I discussed how when you go online and use social media, you feel liberated from your personal identity, and thus come to dissociate from it more and more, leading to all kinds of problems in your offline life. And a good illustration of what I'm talking about is the show Westworld. What Westworld is really about, or at least the reason it was so popular at the time and struck people, was because it depicted this dichotomy of the online self versus the offline self very effectively. The online self was represented by the tourists who ran amok in the park, free to be and do whatever they wanted. The offline self, on the other hand, was represented by the androids, who were trapped in their identities day after day. And as it was on the show, so it is in our world. We have video games, the internet, the whole virtual world where we can seemingly do and be whatever we want. And then we have the real world, the workaday world, where we feel trapped in our own identities, our own selves, which ultimately remain static and unchanging. And just as in the show, the androids rebelled against their condition, so there was a kind of rebellion in our world. And that rebellion is what we're going to talk about today. Now, there are two groups of very online people most involved in this rebellion. And strangely enough, these two groups are thought to be, and consider themselves, arch enemies, completely opposed. And yet it's my contention that these two groups are far less different than they'd have you believe. In fact, in a certain sense, they could even be said to be the same. What are these two groups? Trolls and SJWs. Now, to understand the nature of these groups, we first must understand the concept of a troll. A troll, according to the dictionary, is someone who harasses other people online to try to get a negative reaction from them. The most important thing to understand about trolls is that they are anonymous. They have no fixed identity, beliefs, or values. Their prey are those who seemingly do, and the troll's aim is to produce an emotional display of attachment to whatever belief, identity, or value the troll is targeted. Then the troll can point to the foolishness of his victim. They fell for the joke. The troll, during this entire operation, never loses his ironic detachment, which his anonymous condition on the internet makes easy. His opponent, however, did. Now, the home of the trolls is a place called 4chan. And on 4chan, the trolls constantly hone their sense of detachment and dissociation from their personal identities in their offline lives. The forum on 4chan is completely anonymous and extremely ephemeral, and it is filled with pornography, with shock imagery and content, with the celebration of personal failure, the rejection of mainstream ideas and values, and the deprecation of offline life and identity. It appears designed to shock its users into a state of radical self-dissociation. Viewing these forums day after day becomes a kind of endurance game, a training in troll mentality. Are you going to react to that gross-out porn? Are you going to react to that politically incorrect slur or insult? Or are you going to stay cool? Are you going to remain detached and not take it seriously? Like the tourists in Westworld, the true troll sees everyone in real life as so many androids, trapped in a false reality, enslaved to their own identities. Trolling is the way out. As one online writer has put it, trolls are on a path towards enlightenment, a state of mind where nothing is unexpected and there isn't an attachment to anything. Or we might refer to another manifestation of the troll in American culture, the Joker. Here we see a psychologist in a Batman comic discussing the Joker's condition. Unlike you and I, the Joker seems to have no control over the sensory information he's receiving from the outside world. He can only cope with that chaotic barrage of input by going with the flow. He creates himself each day. He sees himself as the lord of misrule and the world as a theater of the absurd. That's why some days he's a mischievous clown, in others a psychopathic killer. He has no real personality. Like the Joker, the true troll has no personal identity, no personality. He is attempting to cut himself off from it entirely, to become anonymous, imperturbable, a smiling mask without a face behind it. And that brings us to the SJWs. Now, the SJWs emerged from a website called Tumblr, where, like 4chan, users are anonymous. And while the trolls of 4chan were mostly young men, the early SJWs on Tumblr were mostly young women. And these young women engaged in a particular form of online activity known as social justice activism. Now, this social justice activism is really the SJW version of trolling. They're very similar operations. For when an SJW attacks someone for being racist or sexist or ableist or whatever, they are really attacking that individual's attachment to his own identity, in seeking, just like the trolls, to produce a negative reaction, which will prove that their victim is indeed emotionally attached to the identity in question. For SJWs, as for trolls, personal identity is the source of all pain and suffering, as something to detach and dissociate from. They look out on the world and see so many androids just mindlessly enslaved to their own identities. And while SJWs appear obsessed with their identities, while they are always talking about how they identify as this or that, they are also quite clearly detached from those identities. The problem, they keep telling us, is that other people, in society as a whole, is not as detached as they are. And that's why the world is a terrible place. In their activism, in their canceling campaigns, their pedagogical outreach, self-education sessions, and purity spirals, SJWs are really attempting to increase their own and everyone else's detachment from their own identities, just like the trolls. This is a post from Tumblr, a very popular one, as you can see. On every other platform it says, you have to be a real person. But on Tumblr, you're just an icon and username, and whatever your hyperfixation is at the current moment. Here's another post, also very popular. I just enjoy existing in hotels. The long, identical hallways, the soulless, abstract art, the weird noises the air conditioner makes, strange city lights in the window, 6 stories off the ground, strangers chatting in the hall, nothing in the dresser, no past, but an infinite present. But to the extent that you have no past, you have no identity. The desire for nothing but an infinite present, infinite possibilities, is the desire to have no identity, no attachments, no constraints, but no form either. It is the desire to be anonymous. And in their purest form, both trolls and SJWs are expressions of anonymity, of life without any fixed or stable identity at all. They are what happens when we lose touch with our own personal identities and think that we can be free of them. But we can never actually do that, because we can never truly detach ourselves from the foundation of our personal identities, which is our bodies. The idea that we can, the idea that we can just take off our bodies like an old skin and throw them away or reprogram them like computers, is a mistake. A mistake I believe we were led into, ironically, by identifying too much with our technology and letting it hypnotize us. But the spell is wearing off. And in the next talk, I'm going to discuss the fallout from this foolish endeavor.